Hey y'all, it's Matt with Fisherman Crossing. Thanks for taking some time out of your day to watch this video. I'm joined by my good friend Mike Garrison, and we are going to have a little conversation. I'd asked Mike a little bit about what he thought in terms of goals as it relates to fishing. And so I want to get his input. I want to get a couple of other voices on the topic, because does it matter? Should you have goals in relation to your fishing? What does it mean if you do, and what does it mean if you don't, right? So Mike, just in general, when you think about fishing, is it about getting better? Is it about enjoying your time on the water? What is it for you?
It's really getting better for me has got to include enjoying my time on the water. So I'm a type A plus, squirrel hopped up on methamphetamine, intense guy. So I can sometimes slide into an extraordinarily unhealthy, internally competitive thing where it's not successful if I don't catch a lot of fish, or it's not successful if I don't feel like I executed my technique to the highest level. That's not good. So generally for me, it's about, did I do the best I could that day given the given conditions? But more importantly, was I appreciating the fact that, Jesus basically created this world, that I get a chance to do this as opposed to being someplace else with no chance to do it. So that's what's happening more and more for me. It's about appreciation. It's one of the reasons why I'm focusing on one particular type of fishing more this year than any other type of technique.
That's a great way to put it. And I want to get to kind of a deeper dive in terms of that type of technique here in a couple minutes. When you were talking, something that came to mind is when I first started fly fishing. So I grew up in West Tennessee. Nobody fly fished there. I went on one fly fishing trip before I was 26, and that was with a guy who was my boss, who went to Missouri once a year. He handed me a fly rod and said, go catch fish with this. And I tried it and swore I'd never do it again because it was stupid and I couldn't catch fish with it. But what I learned is, it's a very different technique, right? So when I moved here to Virginia, I started, dabbling in the fly fishing after talking to a guy at a delayed harvest area.
To clarify, the good part of Virginia.
Correct. Yes, if you're watching this and are not aware that there is a good part and a bad part, there's a good part, and it's not remotely close to 50%, but I won't go any more into it than that.
That's accurate.
So anyhow, moved here, met somebody who was a fly angler and, seemed kind of interesting, so I thought I'd give it a go. But to your point, I could go out with conventional tackle and catch fish reliably. But if I didn't catch fish, then I was like, this is stupid. I wasted my day. I shouldn't even be out on the water right now. I had, a 2-year-old at the time, and everything else in the world was fighting for my attention, and I should have just been doing that, is how I felt. When I picked up the fly rod and I took it, I went a long time, longer than I can't recollect exactly how long it was, but I went a long time just trying to figure out the mechanics of the casting. And then, went a long time without even catching a fish, but I would find myself improving a little bit over time. And eventually I realized, if I'm going to get any good at this, I've just got to set down my conventional tackle in period for a while. And so I did that for about 7 years and focused strictly on fly fishing, prior to, picking it back up and finding that in my life, there's a place for both. So when you think about, goals, they don't necessarily have to be, hey, I want to go out and catch a ton of fish, or I want to catch a big fish, or anything like that. For that period of time, for me, it was, hey, I need to figure out how to cast and not have my fly get pulled through the water by these conflicting currents that are in the river. And so when you think about, I want to dive now a little more in depth with what you were talking about. You are setting aside many of the types of fishing you do to really hone in and deep dive. I don't know if it's going to be a 7-year deep dive, but deep dive into what it means to do this one style of fishing. Tell us a little bit more about that style of fishing.
The only caveat is I'm not giving up my 7 weight going after smallmouth bass. That's my caveat. But I've decided that this year I'm going to pursue traditional Tenkara fishing, which is not your standard only dead drift type stuff, but using fly manipulations, using more traditional Japanese style flies, where I'm trying to kind of eliminate some of the carrying stress I have about, am I carrying the exact perfect fly for this day to have the best possible chance? And that's what happened to me last year, Matt, is I got into this, I need to be operating at the highest percentile chance of catching fish. And fishing didn't stop being fun, by the way.
That's good.
That didn't happen. But it stopped having the same recuperative effect. And I need fly fishing because currently it's the only thing that actually shuts off my brain out of the anxiety, the drive. It's one of the few places where it's just me, nature, and God. And so the technique that I like, it's called Tenkara. And Tenkara is a fixed line style of fly fishing, which ironically is not just Japanese. You can find examples of it all over the world because reels are a recent invention. It's recent technology in fly fishing. But I find it to be beautiful because it's simple, right? You've got a fixed length of line. You've got a fixed length of rod, which is very flexible, very intuitive, very, very beautiful and aesthetic for me. And your ability to be versatile with a Tenkara rod comes down to how in tune you are physically and emotionally and spiritually with your equipment. Not the varied amount of equipment, but that specific equipment. And I just think it's more beautiful. I think it's for me, it's a more beautiful way to fish. I've been very blessed to fish with you and to fish with other people, lots of guides, and I love all types of fly fishing. Matt, you've been subject to many diatribes and rants about how much I love it. But Tenkara for me just does something to my soul. It's not the best way to fly fish, but it is the most beautiful way for me to fly fish. And so today, I brought 2 different Tenkara rods, and one is for nymphing and one is for traditional Japanese, and I'm just going to see how it feels.
Right on. Well, so for y'all who are not in the know when we talk about traditional Japanese and fly manipulation, right? If you are a fly angler, what we're talking about is something that's similar to what we would call a soft hackle, right?
Yeah, wet fly.
Exactly, a wet fly. So a traditional Japanese fly is like a soft hackle wet fly, which moves a little bit more in the water and gives a little bit more presentation, even with currents. But to your point, especially with the Japanese style, because the hackle's reversed, where it's aimed towards
some of them. That's only one type of Japanese fly.
Okay.
That's only one type.
Okay. So when we talk about then, I'm going to ask you to break down the differences and talk a little bit about that manipulation, because I think people understand if they fly fished how soft hackles work with current. What does it look like to manipulate that?
So you're talking about a reverse hackle fly, which is designed that when you manipulate the fly, the hackle, the feathers are going to expand and contract as you pull it or swing it. And so it's just designed to appear more lifelike. But there's all kinds of Japanese Tenkara flies that resemble more of not necessarily a dry fly, but a traditionally hackled fly that is designed to sit higher in the water column. But the beautiful thing of Tenkara is when you master the technique of it, you have all the choices because you're using a longer telescopic rod. So I can literally, with my 13-foot rod, reach across the current and just have my fly skip off of the surface like a mayfly that is just hatched and is just either laying eggs or just warming its wings up. Or I can take that same fly and with a casting technique, get it into a little bit of current, get it down lower, pull it at 90 degrees across the current, like a caddis trying to get to the or a stonefly trying to get to the side of the riverbank. You can do anything with it. The one thing you can't do is you can't reel. So a lot of these techniques involve how you manipulate the angle of your rod, how you raise it, how you lower it, and then also how you deal with the limitations. Because one of the big valid techniques, criticism of Tenkara by good friends of mine that are experts at nymphing with monofilament, but on a rod and reel. One of the criticisms is like you can't get everywhere, right? You've got to be able to accept that. There'll be maybe times today where I'm wanting to get a fly to a spot and I can't do it because of the Tenkara rod. But like Daniel Garrado, who is a gentleman that basically really brought commercial Tenkara equipment to the United States, Daniel says that we fish with our feet in Tenkara. Like, so we are moving, and we are not trying to get every fish out of one position. We're trying to keep moving along with the river.
I like that. I've never heard that quote before. The we're fishing with our feet, that aspect of it. And I think a lot of us, we think about, it's funny because some folks I talk to, stealth is crucial, right? It's all about trying to make sure you're not disturbing the fish. And other folks will walk up to me in a hole and just want to, kind of splash around the edge and have conversations and go, oh, it's not hurting nothing, right?
Right. I don't like those people.
It's tough to say, right? Because, on one hand, they may be used to fishing for trout that maybe are stocked, that, are more accustomed throughout the course of their lifetime to having human interaction and don't really get, stung in the mouth until one occasion. But a lot of times the trout you're targeting, you don't fish for stock trout at all, right?
Well, if they happen to be where I'm fishing, I fish for them.
But let me rephrase. There's this chart on the website for the Virginia Department of Wildlife Resources where you can go out and at 3 o'clock every single day, they will update and tell you where fish have put in. Have you consulted that chart and then planned your fishing around that?
No.
Thank you. Okay. All right. And there's no faulting whatsoever anybody who does that.
In my defense, I have a really good friend who's in the car with me today who does that. So, like, if I want to know where they're stocking because I'm lazy, I just call you.
Yeah.
Literally, I've done that.
Yeah. And I've texted you before as well. Hey, I'm here. They just put fish in. It's not even going to be announced yet. Grab a rod, right?
Right. Totally.
Yeah. But as far as that goes, I feel like the approach to Tenkara is much more immersive.
Yes. You know what? I wouldn't say that. I'd say it's just different. Like, so Tenkara is... So, like, I'm a big fan of this guy, Dominic Swintoski, who is the owner of a website called Trout Bitten. He's one of the greatest, in my opinion, one of the greatest teachers of how to nymph on the planet. And I've been out with Dom on a couple of guided trips and learned so much. His monorig system is amazing. And I can confidently say that is the most versatile, most effective way to guarantee that you're going to catch trout and have the best possible chance of catching trout when you show up in the river with one rod, one reel, one line. And I really enjoy that, but Tenkara is more beautiful for me. There's just a different feel when I do catch a trout. The cast feels different. It's just aesthetically, it's more immersive aesthetically. The monorig system, all in, is more immersive cognitively.
Okay.
In a different way.
So you feel like you're able to more mentally commit to the activity at hand with the monorig more so than with the Tenkara?
No. I mean, I'm having a hard time. When I dream of fly fishing, I dream of fly fishing with a Tenkara rod.
Here's when I say makes sense. Okay, let me put it in this perspective. You talked earlier about how fly fishing is the only thing that allows you to shut your brain off.
Correct.
Right? Would you say that Tenkara allows you to enjoy the experience while still also taking in the motion of moving with water and also being able to appreciate the scenery, whereas the mono rig, you're highly focused on what's happening in your hand at the end of your line?
No. I mean, it's really, really subtle. I think we missed the exit potentially, by the way, but That's for the listener. We're doing what we normally do, which is get lost. But I think the secret for me, and this is a highly personal thing. I think that if you get into fly fishing, you should absolutely fish a whole bunch of different ways and different techniques. But for me, just something in my soul is really touched when I use the Tenkara rod. I think we're good. I think that's kind of the difference. It's like I see nature. It's beautiful. Like last time Dominic and I were out fly fishing, we're like, who's got it better than us? And we're like, nobody. Right? It was beautiful. It was snowing. We were in State College, Pennsylvania. The scenery. I mean, it was just wild brown trout. It was just beautiful. And I loved it. Like, it's totally immersive. But no matter what I do, I keep coming back and wanting to do Tenkara. And the decision I made is I've never gone all in on Tenkara using the traditional fly. So I've always Tenkara fished using a tactical nymphing style and or traditional Western dry flies and stuff. So I'm making a commitment to develop completely the manipulations part of it. I bought this. There's a company called Discover Tenkara. They have a website, and they've got all of these instructional videos with the Japanese masters teaching you all of this stuff, and it's hours upon hours of footage. So that's what I'm doing.
I gotcha. Okay, well that makes sense. So it's almost, and don't take this the wrong way, it's beyond what you can bring to words in terms of what draws you to Tenkara over a different style of fly fishing. Okay.
It's a spiritual thing. It's not that Tenkara is better, because quite frankly, like the monorig system, when you master it, especially I recommend anybody that wants to learn how to fish better to go fish with Dominic at Trout Pit. He's an unbelievable teacher, great guy, spectacular guy. I mean, he's a musician, so he gets soul and he gets stuff like that as well. But I just like Tenkara. It's the limitations of Tenkara actually, from a mental health standpoint, are very, very healthy for me. We're taking that little thing, not this first one, the second one.
Towards the church.
You got it.
Okay.
So, ironically, turn after Yamato.
Yeah, we didn't plan it that way. All right, so as you were talking just now, I was thinking about that Henry David Thoreau quote. Men will go fishing all their lives without realizing that it's fish that they're after. So you're cognitive that the limitations exist that may keep you from being able to target as many fish as you could in other circumstances, but you now realize in a lot of respects that it is more than just fish that you're after.
That's the biggest thing, is like I am very competitive and obsessive compulsive, and I've got PTSD. There's a certain level of heightened friction neurologically for me at all times, and the slight restrictions that Tenkara puts on me are more than compensated for by the beauty of the stroke, the beauty of the way it works. I got to fish with this guy named Rob Worthing, who's a physician in Lexington, Kentucky, and is one of the greatest Tenkara teachers and fishers in the world, even though he would probably say he wasn't. He's a very humble guy. And he showed me this system of fishing called Oni Tenkara, which is all about a amazingly beautiful aerial mending style of fishing with a fixed line, which allows you to do things that you can get 80% of with the monorig. You can mend a level line with a monorig. I've done that, but it's not quite the same just because of traditional fly rods are significantly, and you also have got the tackle background too. They're so much more robust than a Tenkara rod. Like when you look at the way it's designed, because we don't have the guides, right? We don't have the guides, and we're not. It's a telescopic rod, so it's just like you've done it. How would you describe the difference between like my 4-weight. You fished one of my 10-foot 4-weights, and you fished a Tenkara rod. What would you call the difference in the two rods? This one.
Yeah, great question. So yeah, last time we were out at this spot, I did use Mike.
Smart one on this podcast. Come on, man.
I don't know about all that. I'm just the pretty one. So last time we were on this podcast, or last time we were on this water, I did borrow Mike's 10-foot tactical nymphing 4-weight rod, and honestly, it felt a lot more like conventional tackle fishing to me than fly fishing. And part of that was,
But it was still fly fishing.
Well, depends on who you ask. So we fished with fly rods, right? And we fished with fly reels, right?
And I fished with flies.
Yeah, and I fished with flies as well, but some of them were tungsten with like a woolly worm style, so they were heavy enough that I could cast them, especially below a float. And that is something I do. Like, I'll take subsurface flies and I'll fish them on a western, or on not even a western rod. I'll fish them on a conventional tackle rod underneath, a adjustable bubble, or sometimes even just a regular float.
That inline thing of yours, right?
Yeah, the center pin rod. Yep. Yeah. So a lot of my center pinning is done with flies as well. But I think when we were out, I did tie on a hair jig. I don't think I put any of the soft plastic stone flies on when we were out with that. But after noting that, with the weight of the flies being what carries the inertia rather than the weight of the line, right? That's really the delineation if I look at it. It's what is bringing it to your fish or to where you're casting. Is it the weight of the fly? Is it the weight of the line? So I'm sure there are people who will cast smaller flies than I was casting with a mono rig, sure, and are casting it with the weight of the line. But it did feel very much like that to me. Now, Tenkara,
it's always easier with the mono rig with weight.
That makes sense. But the cool thing I did like about it, thinking about it from a conventional tackle standpoint, is, one of the things we have going for us as fly anglers is we don't necessarily have to reel and then cast, right? So, you can keep control of your line, get it back out without reeling everything in and then lobbing another cast back out there. And so I was definitely able to do that with the mono rig setup. As far as Tenkara goes, there are, like, when I go up into the hills, and maybe that involves a little bit of light backpacking, I love the fact that the Tenkara rod, I can just pack it down. And so with my Tenkara rod, I've got a PVC floating line, like a 0 or a 1-weight floating line that I've cut into sections, and I use that sometimes, the running line side of it. And I'll put, very Western dry flies like a Adams or a Parachute Adams or a Royal Coachman, something like that on there, and I'll fish it very much like a Western rod. But the Tenkara rod, the difference for me comes down to when I have a fish on, it's not so much me thinking about, am I trying to get this fish on the reel? Am I trying to control it with whatever line is in my hand? It's very much about, am I angling the rod?
Not trip on slack line.
Yeah. Am I trying to, deal with all that hooey or not? And with Tenkara, the only thing I have to focus on when I've got a fish on is trying to bend that rod over opposite the direction of wherever the fish is going, unless it tries to run. And frankly, even if it tries to run, I'll basically let them try to pull some, but I'm still trying to turn them, trying to direct their flow or direct their movement as they're trying to run. I feel like you can still pull them aside. So
you totally can. Like that's the curve, the power curve of the rod, and the delicacy of the thinner segments as you get toward the top of the rod will actually allow for a tremendous amount of tippet protection. And you just got to turn that sucker over, get it parallel. If you lift straight up the Tenkara rod, you're probably going to lose that fish. So get it to the side. And my thing is, I get it to the side, and if that fish wins by breaking off, he breaks off, right?
Yeah. And in the fighting aspect of it, I feel like the Tenkara is great. In the landing aspect of it, that's where things get to be the challenge for me.
It's a skill. It is definitely a skill. You have to, and the mono rig actually helps you some with that, right? Because, you're using a longer rod if you're using a tight line technique for nymphing, because it just gives you reach, and reach gives you less sag. So, but the beauty of the Tenkara rod is you have to when you're landing a fish with Tenkara, like I've got a couple of 16-foot lines that I made this morning using cider material.
Okay.
Right, it's going to be interesting. Tricolor. And you have to think about what you're doing. You have to, and you can land a fish just as quickly with the Tenkara rod. The one thing that I'll say about Tenkara is you are probably going to lose a few more fish at the net than you would with a regular rod and reel, because I can get a fish on the reel and I can have more control. With Tenkara, especially when you advance and you're using longer lines, you are going to be hand lining at the end.
Yes, and that's where things were getting tricky for me, because it was more than just the length of the rod, it was how flexible the rod was. And I fish fiberglass fly rods, Western rods, but to your point, I can reel in a lot better, a lot farther to get access to that line and control that fish. But, if my rod is still almost doubled over while I'm trying to get the fish to my hand, I'm definitely having to think about, how do I hand line this fish in and get it the rest of the way? So bringing this kind of back full circle, as we think about your goals, if you will, would you say that before making this most recent endeavor into focusing on this particular style of fishing, would you say that you did set goals that were lofty or more like attainable when you went fishing?
Initially, it was just voracious pursuit of fly fishing because I was out of it for a long period of time. So I was just absolutely, and Matt can attest this, I was extraordinarily focused on fishing as much and as well as I could, right? And then as fly fishing healed me and I became less and less anxious about how much time I haven't fished in the past and more about how much I enjoy it now, I've been able to change my goals to where it's now about how beautiful it feels to fish. And it's like, I would just encourage people, just go fish. If you go fish, you're going to have an opportunity to go into yourself, discover who and what you're about, hopefully have a deeper relationship with your Lord, and give yourself an opportunity to evolve. But make sure your goals fill your heart, not just your creel.
See what you did there. But I think you hit on a good point that I want to make sure isn't missed. What you're not saying is Tenkara is the way for everyone to spiritually feel fulfilled by fishing.
I'm explicitly saying it's not.
Right, but it's yours, right?
Just go fish.
So whether that's with a Zebco 33 and a cheap Walmart reel or Walmart rod.
Some people have to chew tobacco, right? So, I mean, if you're going to do the Zebco, baitcaster stuff, I get it,
He's throwing shade, but I want to show y'all.
There it is.
It's not actually tobacco anymore. Now it's this CBD chew.
Oh.
Anyhow.
That's enlightened.
Well, it is enlightened.
You're not just a redneck.
I'm high-tech redneck, and I'm moving up in the world.
You are definitely a high-tech redneck.
I wish y'all could see this setup right now. All right, so I think what we're saying here is your perception of how goals should impact your fishing is what is going to draw you closer to God, what is going to give you a better experience in nature, and what is going to help you feel more fulfilled at what is ultimately recreation, right?
And definitely what will have you be less of an asshole.
That's always key. All right. Well, hey, any parting words for our guest today?
That was it.
All right. Well, that's a good one to end on. Thank y'all so much for tuning in. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we look forward to catching you on the next one. See you.